My name is Alysa McCall. I'm with Polar Bears International, and I'm so excited for you to join us today as we talk all about moms and cubs. Polar bear moms are incredible, as are their babies, and we can't wait to share what we know with them, with you. If you have any questions, please do use the chat box wherever you're watching today. So whether you're on YouTube, if you're on Facebook, explore.org, or polarbearsinternational.org, we have people who are watching for questions and they'll send them to me during the broadcast. And we would love to answer them. And we'll have a special guest joining us pretty soon who will help us answer all your questions about polar bear moms and cubs. So today we are talking to all ages, all audiences, everybody's welcome, and we will dive right in. So first we like to set the stage of where we are in this Tundra Buggy. We call this Tundra Buggy 1, donated to us every year by Frontiers North Adventures. And as we drive around at this time of the year, we're looking for polar bears. And we know polar bears will be here because of the way that their annual migration pattern looks, or their annual gathering pattern, a little more accurate. So at this time of the year, there is no sea ice on Hudson Bay. Polar bears are a sea ice adapted species, so they want to be out there on the ice, but when it's not around, they'll come hang out on shore. So all summer, these polar bears have been spread out up and down the coast, some of them moving a little ways inland even. And at this time of the year, as the temperatures drop, the weather gets colder, sea ice will freeze up in the coming weeks. Polar bears know it, and they are gathering around here, around us, waiting for that ice. And they're waiting for that ice so that they can go hunt their main prey, seals. Polar bears love seal blubber. That's their number one food, and they really need the ice to help them get those seals. Ice acts as a platform on which polar bears can sneak up and catch their prey. They can wait by seal holes, or they can sneak up on a seal that's basking, and they can eat that blubber. At this time of the year, you see these bears on your screen here. There's not a lot of seals on that. There's hardly any, actually. Once in a while, they get a bit lucky if a seal gets stuck, but really these bears are fasting. And you'll hear more about fasting today. Fasting means when you're not eating. We do sometimes see them chew on some seaweed, some kelp, berries, eggs, some land foods, but polar bears truly are a blubber hunting ice bear. And moms and cubs are some of the most special polar bears of all. They're the most vulnerable polar bears in the population. They need our help. We need to help protect moms and cubs so that we can keep adding polar bears to the population and that we can keep them around for a very long time. So something we wanted to start with you today is a short series of videos about moms and cubs. And as you're watching these videos, please do think about your questions, whether it's about polar bear moms or cubs or kind of anything about bears or where we are right now. Please do send them to us as you're watching these videos, and we'll be back with you shortly. Enjoy. Each year, around January 1st, polar bear moms give birth to tiny, helpless cubs weighing only about 1 kilogram, the size of a block of butter. The family spends most of the winter snuggled up in a den with mom nursing her babies. These tiny cubs are completely reliant on their mother, and their only food source is her milk. Compared to the milk you put on your cereal, which is usually 1 to 3% fat, polar bear milk starts around 31% fat. When cubs are first born, the fatty milk helps them grow quickly. In only 2 or 3 months, the cubs can already be 10 times bigger than when they were born. And once they're strong enough, mother polar bears know it's time to emerge from their dens. Spring is a very special time of year for polar bear moms and their newborn cubs. The family has just emerged after having spent most of the winter snuggled together in a den. This is the first time the cubs will feel the sun on their faces, the cold wind in their fur, and the snow crunching beneath their paws. The family will stay at their den site for a few days or weeks, giving the cubs a chance to play, explore, and strengthen their legs. The cubs are about the size of a big puppy by now, 7 to 11 kilograms. And though their mom has decided that they're ready to come out of the den, they're still totally dependent on her. It's incredible that at this point the mother polar bear has not eaten for months, all the while nursing and caring for her cubs. In the Hudson Bay region, mother polar bears can go up to 8 months without food.
When the mother decides her cubs are ready, they begin the trip from their den to the vast frozen ocean where seals are abundant and mom can fatten up again. Hopefully, her cubs are strong and mom has enough energy for the long journey ahead. Bears near the Hudson Bay sometimes walk for a week or more and can cover over 100 kilometers to get to the sea ice. Though she's focused on finding seals to feed her family, mom will continue to nurse her cubs for as long as they're with her. As they grow older, the cubs will need less milk and more solid food. The good news is that spring is when seals give birth to their pups in snow caves on the sea ice. This means easy meals for hungry families. At this point, the cubs begin their new journey, learning how to be a polar bear in their Arctic home. From walking on the shifting sea ice, to swimming in frigid water, to avoiding potentially dangerous males, a mother polar bear will begin teaching her young cubs not only how to hunt, but how to simply survive in the Arctic. She has just over 2 years to teach her cubs everything they need to know to live on the frozen ocean. When a polar bear is looking for something to eat, they're looking for seals. Fat is where it's at for polar bears. Only seal blubber provides enough energy to power the biggest bear on the planet. Polar bears are good swimmers, but seals are a tough catch. Seals are much faster, so it's very difficult for bears to hunt them in open water. On the sea ice, polar bears can pounce on seal pups hidden in snow caves, patiently wait for a seal to come up for air at a breathing hole, or try to sneak up on a seal from behind an ice ridge. The Arctic is a harsh place to survive. There are no food sources on land with enough calories to sustain entire polar bear populations in the long term. Polar bears have adapted over the centuries to a life on the sea ice. In the Hudson Bay region, a warming Arctic means polar bears are spending over 1 month longer on land than their grandparents did. That's 1 month less to hunt seals and fatten up before the long ice-free period. For polar bears, fasting longer means worse health and less body fat. And for females, less body fat means it's harder to get pregnant, to feed nursing cubs, and to raise those cubs into the next generation, ultimately resulting in fewer polar bears across the Arctic. But we can help. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing adults can do is to vote with the climate in mind, to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. The most important thing kids can do is talk about it. Let the adults in your life know you care. Share what you learn with your family and friends. Stay curious and ask questions. We can all make a difference outside our own households by influencing where our energy comes from. Polar bear moms and cubs can't speak up for themselves. They need us, our voices, and our votes. There is still hope, and if we work together, we can ensure polar bears roam the sea ice for generations to come.
If you want to see those videos again at any time, you can check out our YouTube page. It has those mom and cub vignettes. We hope that you learned something by watching those videos. And again, please, if you've got any questions, send them in. Our expert is going to be coming in soon. We're excited to meet her. And we also wanted to tell you about our polar bear tracker. So this polar bear you can see on your screen right now, that's one of the bears that's been around us for the last few days. Even this morning, we've already seen 5 or 6 bears out here. They are so funny. They're amazing to watch. But again, as soon as that ice comes back in, these bears are gone. They're going to head out on that ice as soon as they can to go hunt seals. So how do we know what polar bears are doing, especially moms and cubs, in the middle of winter when it's dark and icy and dangerous to get out there? we can use technology. And so we have a subset. So some female adult polar bears are collared in the area we're in. So these are the Western Hudson Bay polar bears. And researchers every year put out some GPS collars, not on all the bears, but these collars talk to satellites throughout the year. And then we can also talk to the satellites and get that information. And in this way, we're able to see and understand where the polar bears are moving throughout the winter. So you can go on our Bear Tracker website, polarbearsinternational.org, Bear Tracker, and check out where different polar bears are right now. Some collars have a delay sometimes, but pretty soon we'll see more of these collars start to move, and then they'll start to move onto the ice. It's pretty neat to see all the bears do different things. And if you click on the different icons, you can learn about each bear. So many of them have cubs, and you can read about how old the mom is, what her cubs are like, see how far they travel. It's a really neat way to better understand polar bears. We can only collar females because males have necks that are thicker than their heads, so they just pull the collars right off. These females can also pull the collars right off if they really want to, but many of them will keep them on for a year or two and give us incredible data and really help us understand how polar bears use sea ice, what types of sea ice they need, how they're hunting out there, and help us answer all sorts of questions. And we have never ending questions about polar bears. We've got so many things yet to learn. So it's so important that we keep doing important research and asking those questions. And that is one of the coolest things about who I'm introducing you to today, Dr. Louise Archer, friend and colleague. She asks amazing questions and figures out how to answer them in really neat ways. So welcome, Louise. Thank you for being here with us today.
Hi, Alysa. Thank you. I'm so happy to get to join you today and to talk to everyone.
Yeah, it's so nice to have you. So Louise, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to study polar bears?
Sure. So I'm super interested in how we can use things like math and models and statistics to understand a little bit more about wildlife populations. So how we can take data from the field, tease apart some kind of answers to interesting questions using this data, and then use these answers to protect species like polar bears.
So what kind of work are you doing that's related to polar bear moms and cubs? How does using math and data help moms and cubs?
Yeah, good question. So for polar bear moms and cubs, the big thing for them is really managing their energy, right? Because it's a long time for a polar bear mom to support her cub. The cub will typically stick with her for about 2.5 years. Mom will provide milk for either one or two cubs during that time, and that milk is very, very high in energy. So we can build models of how mom uses her energy and manages it over that 2.5 year period, so she can continue supporting her cub, and how those kind of relationships might change as we're seeing changing sea ice conditions.
Could you tell us a bit more about polar bear milk? Because I know it's quite special and it must be really hard to study. I guess, A, how do we know anything about polar bear milk? And B, what do we know about it?
Yeah, polar bear milk is pretty special. So it's really, really high in fat. That's what allows polar bear cubs to grow really quickly, and to be able to develop fat and grow and survive out on the sea ice. So milk starts off at around 33% fat. So that's kind of like cream. So if you imagine you're a polar bear cub and you're drinking the equivalent of whipping cream, that's going to get you growing very, very quickly. Um, but it is difficult to study. So in Western Hudson Bay, because these polar bears come onto land in the summertime, it gives an opportunity for researchers to get out there and to study these bears. So by administering oxytocin, so this is a hormone that will encourage polar bear moms to express some of their milk, and we can take a sample from the polar bear moms and then measure the energy content in the milk. So it's kind of a cool way to see what's happening to the milk. And you can do that several times to see how the milk changes as well through time for a single individual bear, or compare how different bears change across years as well, and get to understand kind of what's happening through time. So yeah, very, very unique thing to get out and try and collect a sample of polar bear milk.
That's quite a research project. With your work, when you find out more about moms and cubs, how can what you learn help us better protect these families?
Yeah, so I guess one of the key things that we learned was that the energy content in the milk actually drops off the longer polar bear mums spend on land. So the longer they're on land when they're not eating, it becomes harder for them to provide that really high energy fatty milk for their cubs. And that has a knock on impact on their cubs where their growth slows down. So we know that it's really important for mums to be able to support cubs, and the longer they're spending off the ice, the harder it is for them to do so. So that's a really good motivation for us to try and ensure that fairs have access to sea ice for as long as possible, and that they're getting back out onto the sea ice as long as possible. So it helps us to understand a little bit about the challenges facing polar bear mums and cubs, and how we can play a role in keeping the sea ice habitat that they need in the Arctic to give them the best chance out there.
Absolutely. We have a question for you, kind of about broader polar bear families in a way. It's a question from MW. When do males and females meet up and mate? Is that a warmer weather activity for them?
So yeah, the polar bear mating is a pretty cool system. So it typically happens on the sea ice. We don't see them mating around this time of the year. It's going to be in kind of from March, April, through May, June, and the female polar bears will leave pheromones in their paw prints out on the snow, and that allows the males to track them down and through their scent that's left in the paw prints. So it's still quite a cold weather activity for them that happens out on the sea ice. And then the pregnant female will carry that fertilized egg for several months.
Another question for you. On average, how many cubs would a single female have in her lifetime? Have you done that math?
Well, yeah, no, that's a good one, and it really does vary. It can vary across subpopulations, and it can kind of vary across individuals as well. So, for a female in Western Hudson Bay, she might start reproducing age 5 or 6, and she might have um, a litter every 2 to 3 years until she's maybe 18, 19, 20 years old. So she could really be producing maybe as many as 10 to 12 cubs, because cub survival is quite low. Um, as few as 5 or 6 of those cubs might actually make it. So it really does vary between individuals. But every 3 years or so is when a female might produce a litter.
So, if a female should be reproducing about every 3 years or so, is there any reason why she wouldn't be able to reproduce 1 year, or is it pretty consistent?
Yeah, absolutely. So if the female doesn't have enough body fat to sustain both herself and her newborn cubs in the den, then it really doesn't make sense for her to skip out on that time feeding on the ice and to enter the den. So if she doesn't carry enough body fat, then she won't proceed with the pregnancy, and she'll go back out onto the sea ice with the rest of the population instead of entering a maternity den. So she really has to be fat enough to be able to support herself and to provide that high fat milk for her cubs as soon as they're born.
Do we know how fat she needs to be? Is there like a certain limit or just whatever her body feels good at?
Yeah, there's like a minimum threshold for a female. Yeah, so there's like a bottom level that she needs to hit to be able to support herself.
Okay. All right. Couple more questions for you. This is kind of a funny one. I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. Can humans drink polar bear milk, and what would it taste like? Any ideas?
Humans could drink polar bear milk. I personally haven't tasted it. I have heard from other researchers that it's a little bit fishy. And I would guess that it also is very, very rich. So remember, it's over 30% fat, so quite close to whipping cream. So it's probably quite thick, creamy, and fishy. So polar bear cubs might love it, but it's not something I think that I would like to drink too much of.
Yeah, like the a weird fish soup, maybe. Not that appealing for us. Too funny. We have a comment here about swimming. So we know polar bears can do really long swims. They're quite agile in the water. We assume this person asking assumes that cubs can't swim quite as far. Do you know how well cubs can swim or how far they can go with their mom, or how does that work when you're trying to raise little babies in this icy, watery environment?
Yeah, that's a great question because we are seeing that in some areas, polar bears are having to swim for longer distances as the sea ice is breaking up more and more. Um, for adult bears, it's not such a problem because they have a really thick layer of fat, and that's what keeps them warm in the water. Their fur helps keep them warm when they're out in the air, but in the water, it's really that body fat that acts as an insulator and keeps in their body heat. But for very small cubs, they don't have this layer of body fat, right? They haven't built up all the fat they need to keep them warm, and their fur doesn't keep them warm in the water either. So that's the biggest challenge for small cubs is that they lose heat very rapidly in the water, and that's really the biggest challenge for them. So a mom with a new cub will try and avoid taking her young cub into the water so it doesn't lose too much heat, and that can risk its survival as well.
Moms and cubs do have a lot of challenges that they're facing right now. It's part of the reason we are working so hard to keep them in the Arctic. Louise, what keeps you hopeful and what keeps you kind of working with polar bears?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the thing that keeps me hopeful is just how many people we have that are interested in solving this problem. So there's so many people across all walks of life that are interested in polar bears, want to know what's happening in the Arctic, want to know what they can do. So for me, that's really inspiring. It means that when you kind of step away from your laptop and from doing the math and the analysis, you can actually have some real conversations with people and see how important it is to them. So that always makes me hopeful for the work we're doing and the work that everyone else is doing to keep polar bears safe as well. So yeah, that's what I feel hopeful about.
Love that. We have a question here about cub survival rate. Can you comment on what an average rate might be and why?
Yeah, so an average cub survival rate is around 50%. It can vary a lot between years depending on the ice conditions in that year. If it's a very, very poor ice year where bears are coming on shore early, moving back to the sea ice late, then it can really drop right down to as low as 30% and occasionally can be even lower than that as well. So it can vary quite a lot, and that's one rate that we've seen change with long-term declines in sea ice is cub survival has also declined with that as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Louise, for being with us today. You taught us lots about moms and cubs. We really appreciate you and your expertise, and I will see you again soon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We can start to wrap up. We hope you learned something about moms and cubs today. At Polar Bears International, we are working all the time to help keep polar bears in the Arctic for a very long time for future generations, and that means protecting moms and cubs. And you can help us protect them by using your voice, for speaking up about what you care about, and for, spreading the word to friends, family, colleagues, teachers that we need cleaner energy sources. Polar bears deserve a stable future, and we deserve a stable future, and those things go hand in hand. To all the teachers watching today, please do check out our website for free curriculum. We have lessons, units, activities on our website. Also, check out our feedback survey. Everyone who fills out a feedback survey this year will get a free eco adoption for you or for your classroom, whatever you like. So if you do the survey, you get an eco adoption, pretty neat. And also remember, we've got our YouTube page and all sorts of other resources on polarbearsinternational.org. We are right now at the height of polar bear season. We will be here as long as the polar bears are here. Hopefully the ice comes soon and the bears will go hunt, but for now we're here watching them. If you have any questions that we didn't get to in the broadcast, we'll be checking out all the different resources and places that we're live streaming this. So please do put your questions in or join us next time. We have live events next week and we'll be out here on the tundra with you. So keep using your curiosity, keep learning, keep asking questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for caring about moms and cubs. We have a lot of hope for the future, but we need to work together. We'll see you next time.
Future generations of people and polar bears depend on the decisions and plans that we make today. A polar bear's life cycle is almost exclusively tied to the sea ice. Because polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt, to breed, and sometimes to den, sea ice loss from climate change is their biggest threat, and the reason the bears are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN's Red List of Threatened Species. What we learn about climate change impacts on polar bears in Hudson Bay can be applied across the Arctic to help conserve other populations. Climate change is already affecting some populations of polar bears. Since we get most of our energy from fossil fuels, we are producing huge amounts of carbon dioxide. You see, regular amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere act like a blanket around the Earth, trapping heat and keeping our planet at a stable temperature. However, when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas for energy, we pump rampant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This buildup thickens the blanket, trapping too much heat, disrupting the climate, and melting Arctic sea ice. When Arctic waters are cold enough, the top layer freezes into a special type of ice called sea ice. Sea ice is to the ocean what soil is to a forest. It supports the entire Arctic food chain. Food from this marine ecosystem also sustains northern communities. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing we can do is vote with the climate in mind to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. In the meantime, we can directly participate in and learn more about our local and regional renewable energy options. We can all make a difference outside our own households by influencing where our energy comes from. Because together, we can make sure that polar bears roam the Arctic sea ice for generations to come.